Good afternoon. First of all, I want to praise Mario, Professor De Shapiro, for the wonderful work he has been doing in not only in the master's program, but in this seminar. Congratulations, Mr. De Shapiro. Second, this research that's going on is not finished. Third is a Brazilian research concerning the Brazilian securities market. And fourth, I want to take the chance to have David, my friend David, with us, because he has been writing extensively in the, 45 years ago, about the same thing. Well, the whole idea is that securities market is something important to finance business. Then we start to research, and this research is going on by, I'm researching with Renato Vilela and myself since the very beginning. So, and this is just part of the research. The research is much bigger. If we look, and we research 11 years, if we have a look on the IPOs, and adding IPOs and follow-ons, the securities market in Brazil had just 227 IPOs. We must disconsider the 2007 because it was that crazy moment of the international market just pouring money in Brazil. But if you have an average, we'll see that between IPOs and follow-ons, an average of 10, 12 per year. And when we compare this with the Brazilian gross national product, that's nothing. And there is something interesting. Most of the IPOs are big issues. So the Brazilian securities market is concerned, and the structure goes on the big issues. We had only four small issues that's less than 150 million reais. Most of them mean 88 between 500 and 1 billion, and 58, that's a huge figure, more than 1 billion reais. What does this mean? Who subscribe those issues? We'll see that institutional investors that represent just 15.36% in number of subscribers, but they represent 75% of the total amount of money involved in this subscription. Natural persons, that way, they were nearly 80% of the people who subscribe, but they represent less than 8%. And what's important, the others. Others are financial institutions linked or to the distribution or to the issuer. So then, keep in mind the amount of money that the IPOs represent in the past. We have that nearly 90% is 90% of the total subscription is done by institutional investors and financial institutions. What does that mean? It means that the Brazilian securities market is organized towards the big issues, the big subscribers. And what is happening in the Brazilian securities market? Stocks, all those things that I said before, concerns about stocks. In black is companies coming to the market. In red, companies leaving the market. So if we analyze in the last 11 years, the stock exchange lost 72 companies. That's quite a huge number, since we have less than 400 companies quoted in the securities market. Besides, it's not here, but the level of liquidity of this secondary market is quite thin. We have most of the companies who does not trade any share in 1 month. Well, let's go to conclusions. There is a decreasing number of publicly held corporations going to the market. Why? And the purpose is to find answers and to propose answers. Second, this market is designed toward only big companies, big issues, and the one who buys and the one who makes the link between the company, issuing company, and the buyer, more than 70% of those distributions is divided among 4 banks. And what does it mean? It means that there is no structure to receive new entrance companies. And there is no possibility of a medium-sized company go to the market, not only because they can want to go or not, but there is no structure, financial structure, to make the floating of those shares in the market. Big banks, they are not interested. Big buyers, financial institutions and pension funds and so on, they are not interested in small issues. Fourth, the stock market does not represent a way out option to the private equity industry, while lacks liquidity. If you buy stock, the stock is a security forever. If you don't have liquidity, how can you leave this investment to apply your money in other investments? Plus, there are companies whose purpose is to invest money in a closely held corporation, make the company shape, become better, and then leave the company, selling the investment. If there is no secondary market to sell, what can those companies do? They can do to the same owner, the previous owner. They can sell to some competitor, or they can sell to another private equity company. There is no market, secondary market, way out. Medium-sized companies are not financed by the stock market. And it's crazy when the country has a rate of interest that it has been reducing, but it's quite high. A small percentage of the issued shares are trading secondary market, lack of liquidity. What can be done? Well, I cannot tell you.
This question as well.
In 20 minutes. Should we have another issuing system or placement institutions different from the big banks, as we had in the recent past two, that they were bought? By whom? Big banks. What's necessary? More regulation? What is necessary? Would crowdfunding and other mechanisms be a possibility? What is the role of regulation in this newborn possibility? And is necessary a new understanding of the role of the regulation? I believe so. Why? Because our regulation was a copy of the US regulation in 1933 and 34 Act. And when the Brazilian government, military government, decides to import some people to help central banks, people to start a securities market here, they imported the chief counsel of the SEC and the vice chief counsel of SEC. And they had in mind what? Their market. So we have this sort of problem concerning stocks. Now let's go to the debentures of bonds. Bonds is the reverse when compared with stocks. All the big issues, the big amount of issues goes up to 150,000 reais. And the big issues, they are much less, 66, compared with 378 plus 245. Who subscribe the issue? Institutional investors, again, they represent 45% of the buyers, and they subscribe 43% of the total issue. And again, others, banks. So, again, now just have some water. Again, what happens with the bonds market? Here we have the findings from 2005 up to 16. The red line, financial institutions linked to issuer. The black, financial institutions linked to distribution. And the gray, financial institutions and insurance companies. Here we have a comparison of the money involved. The dot in red are the debentures, very, very low. The red line, conventional debentures or conventional bonds. And the red line, a little thicker, is a debenture that has a special, not incentive, but a sort of deregulation. Those are debentures who can be offered to last to no more than, if I'm not wrong, 50 people, and no more than 25 people can buy them, and they are considered by the Brazilian securities regulator as special investors. They know better what they are doing than the other people. So,
That increases Petrobras, right?
yeah, well, I just skipped the yellow because it means Petrobras that distorts any. It was an issue of $60 billion. So it's just to make fun that I put this here. 60 billion, they make fun because it's broken now. So what are the conclusions, some of the conclusions? The debentures works as a bank guarantee. Why that? It took us, Renata and myself, a lot of work to find out this. Because when a bank buys bonds, it's considered that he is buying a security. So he can avoid 1.8% of the total value of the issue not paying stamp tax. And financial incentive. Why that? Because when the bank buy bond, that's a sort of collateral that not damage the ability to the bank to lend money. But the big problem is that securities market has no secondary market. If you want to buy a stock, you can buy. If you want to sell the stock, the bond, you have no market. You have incentives. You have one bond that receive an incentive to finance, as you mentioned, highways and so on and so on. But who buys back this bond? The bank who sold you the bond. At what price? The price that the bank wants to make to you. So here we have a huge problem. And this problem shows up every time that the government, since the first government in 1990s, start to talk about privatization and concession of companies that belong to the government and now finance highways and so on and so on. Why that? Because if we take as financier of the privatization or the concession of a given public company or a highway, if you take out the Brazilian Investment Bank and pension funds that are linked to Brazilian public health corporation, companies who belong, the control belongs to the government, there is no way to finance privatization or concession. There is no capital market able to do this, and we'll see why. Se nós olharmos, esse é o tempo, the time, maturity time of the bond. The big red line is 0 to 3 years. the black line, that's declining, 4 to 6 years. And more, 10 years or more, is less than 10% of the total amount issued in bonds in the Brazilian securities market. So, as a conclusion, for one of our any plus one conclusions is that the debenture market has no liquidity, short-term, and mostly bought by the banks. Why? Because the financial system used debentures as a guarantee of bank loan. Right. So that's all, folks.